again, thank you for showing up and entertaining this today. So first, what is it that we're talking about here? Well, I guess just to give a little bit of context, when these language models first became available, personally, my initial curiosity was with how we could use them to help us as developers, and then immediately that sent my mind to, as a trainer, wearing my trainer hat, how we could enable learners on the FileMaker and other products in the Claris platform and make this easier. And I'm a classroom trainer. I'm an online trainer. We've got Matt here as well too, who has the same expertise. There's tons of us in the community with expertise in these areas. But the thing that's always fascinated me is this tutor type of learning. So this really got stuck in my head in the first place through working with Linda Weinman over at lynda.com. Of course, she was the founder of lynda.com, and back in the old days before she became a billionaire, she used to actually take all of us trainers out to dinner. Every week, whoever was in town doing the recordings would get to go out to dinner. And she had this philosophy that she instilled in us, which was called the guide on the side. Now, this is not authored specifically by Linda Weinman, but it's a concept that essentially means it's in contrast to the sage on the stage. And the sage on the stage is the person sort of sitting in front of the learner and dictating all this information to them, and the information flows over them. And this usually happens in a one-to-many type environment as well too. And what her philosophy was, and other people who subscribe to this idea, is that the ultimate way to do this would be that the most effective teaching would involve guiding students to discover and learn independently, rather than just delivering information from a position of authority. And she articulated this through her innovation was video learning. The reason she's a billionaire now is she was one of the first people to bring video learning into especially the tech space. But this idea is actually not even that original. There's this concept called the 2 sigma problem, which is from a gentleman named Benjamin Bloom from way back in 1984. And the concept there was that one-on-one tutoring, the idea is that if a student works with a tutor to master a topic or skill, the student will gain a 2 standard deviation improvement, which is a massive upgrade. That just to kind of give you some context, would take somebody from a 50th percentile learner to a 96th percentile learner just by having a mentor. Now, he framed this up as a problem back in 1984 because the reality of every student, let's say in the school system, having a tutor sitting right next to him is just impossible. And so this was something that, maybe took 40, almost 50 years to mature. But the idea is now we have the ability to have these AI tutors. As a matter of fact, one of the best examples of this is Khan Academy. You guys familiar with Khan Academy? It's Sal Khan, who, by the way, just released a great book called Brave New Worlds, plural, Matt, right? I don't want to get that one wrong. Yeah. He was one of the first people to get access to GPT-4 before the release, and they created this AI guide. And it's more than just a question answer machine. It's got a lot of prompting and guardrails built into it to make it inquisitive and not give out the answers. And it's really just an innovative way to learn, and it's totally achievable. Now, the key is and actually, I don't know if any of you saw the GPT-4.0 release last week, but Sal and his son were actually featured, and I think
with my son, and I love you to check
this out for just a second.
Math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction. But I really want.
By the way, can you guys hear that at all? Okay, good enough. Okay. Oh, wait, whoops, not this guy.
With my son, and I love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction. But I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at
Okay, so now what's actually happening there is pretty fascinating. That tool is the iOS app for ChatGPT, and it has screen broadcast capabilities. So really, I'm just establishing where we are from a technology space and what's possible from a learning standpoint. So days from now, individuals who have access to models that have intelligence, specifically in our discussion here, focused on FileMaker intelligence and guidance, will not only be able to, these learners will not only be able to chat with these sources of knowledge, but they'll be able to have conversations. So that voice that you saw there is one possible use case for the on layout enter script trigger. Yeah, that was an old version. That was me messing around with that a couple of years ago and just having a chat where I can talk back and something that sounded like my voice. But the point is, we have all sorts of technologies available now, like this open source Whisper, which allows for AI chats to be able to interpret voice and instruction and then respond in voice as well too. And these are all technologies that are available to us on the street. And the newest and the greatest one, the latest and greatest one that I just showed from Sal Khan and his son there from GPT-4o, that's going to be available to us via API just this summer. So really what this is about, though, is the knowledge base. And so just to kind of set the stage, I feel strongly we have an amazing opportunity within the Claris community to be able to create a knowledge base that would allow for AI learning. And I believe we may, as a community, be positioned better than maybe any other community in the tech space. And here's why. These AI models, their base latent knowledge on any topic, in this case, we're going to focus on Claris knowledge, like being able to create, answer questions about the products, guide users through creating scripts and calculations and all those types of things. So focusing on that, the base latent knowledge inside the model, which I'm going to talk just briefly about here in a second, is based on a web scraping essentially of everything that's ever been on the internet publicly available. And that corpus of data contains 30 years of conversations about FileMaker. That is very rare in a technology space. And so really is a tremendous opportunity. So there's a wealth of knowledge that's already been put into the corpus of data that can be used as a training baseline. And then additionally, and I'll talk about how these two things intersect, and as I frame up this ask, we also have a community of 50,000 plus developers, active developers in this community worldwide. And this is these factors coming together are force multipliers for creating a knowledge set that is potentially unrivaled in the technology space. And why is that important? Well, let's focus for a second on latent knowledge. Hey, Matt, you don't mind telling people about what this little experiment we did on the podcast? I'll do a more scientific one. I'll show them a more scientific one in a second, but this one was kind of fun. So Matt, I'll let you.
Yeah, I think it's fun. Do it.
So this one here was, you want to let people know what this proficiency test is used for?
Sure. So as part of the class that I teach, the FileMaker Champion class, which is an intensive class that lasts a couple of months to get people to that. It's kind of like a tutoring class, right? Because I limit it to 8 people. Anyway, at the end of the class, I do the certification test about how many questions? 80, something like that. And I try to make it kind of like the FileMaker certification, but scored differently. So, but basically, it covers all the things that I teach in class and focuses on best practices and things that I think that people need to know about design calculations, et cetera. So there's a really good question here. 1 + 1 and 1 ampersand 1.
Sorry,
what is the result? Steven Zelensky knows the answer.
And in this, by the way, there were multiple choice ones, there were true false ones, there were various different types just to kind of shake it all up. And what Matt asked me to do was take the exam. So what I did was I had ChatGPT, actually GPT-4 Turbo, take the exam instead. So I simply took screenshots of the questions and answers like you see here, or the questions and the options for response, and I fed it in, and then I completed the exam and surprised Matt with that after he had graded it. And shockingly, it came back with a 78%. Where does that frame that up a little bit, Matt? What is that versus your human learners? How does that?
That was about as good as a good student in the class. So some did better, some did worse, but that was like right. it was a totally passing grade.
And so very unofficial, test of latent knowledge in GPT-4 Turbo, which I'll pair with a more official test. And Rick, you might remember this because you and I were talking back in 2022, sort of informally about, creating this knowledge and training up a model and where the deficiencies actually lied. And so the way that you can actually do this more scientifically is you can do something that's called semantic scoring. It's the same type of semantic. It's the same type of embedding of data that you're familiar with when it comes to semantic search. But the way you actually do this is you set up a prompt and a completion, similar to what you see like I have on screen here. I ended up doing 140 of these, and so it was literally like, what is this, create a FileMaker calculation that moves text from da 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 da, and then you see the calculation. I actually pulled every one of these 140 examples directly from Claris's help. And then what you do is you send the question over to whatever the model at the time. This GPT 3.5 had just come out, so this is really the only one that we had, the best one we had available at the time. And then what you do is you take the response that comes back from the model and you embed that, and then you determine the similarity or the distance between the correct answer, this is the ground truth answer, and then what the model gave. And so out of 140 questions, the similarity score or the distance was a 0.64, which could loosely be interpreted as a 64% correct. And again, these are prompt completion questions, which is, it's really kind of hard to grade the quality of creating calculations or scripts, for example, which is really what the goal of this would be. But I thought that was actually a pretty reasonable baseline knowledge, and frankly, it really is. So that was GPT 3.5. So I'm not necessarily saying that we
Le
saw.
hicieron un examen de certificación en FileMaker a la inteligencia artificial y lo pasó con 100.
Hold on, I'm trying to get to the mute, but I
Le
can't.
contestó todo.
Sorry, I can't see my cursor with my screen going, but
Le-
okay.
Ahí
Hold
está el
on.
examen y estas son las respuestas. Bueno, las opciones
Hold on a second.
en menos de un minuto. Pues, ahí está.
Clearly, AI is taking you over, Chris.
I know, I'm trying to get to, well, the mouse is not. There we go. Oh, okay. All right, sorry about that, gang. So anyways, so the point is, despite, and here's the other part too, and I'm gonna just be totally frank and transparent about this. I keep my ear to the ground on like how the community and the Claris community talks about AI, and the initial discussions about AI, not so much today, this is very advanced discussions now, but the initial discussions were almost primarily about what it can't do. It seemed like everyone was focusing on, can I use this as a tool to help me as a developer? Because we saw things like GitHub Copilot come out and do incredible things with JavaScript support and Python support. And even GPT-4o right now does amazing code support. It's really almost error-free. And so I thought, well, how can we do this for FileMaker? Well, I think everyone else thought the same thing too, but almost the entire discussion was about where the problems were and how this was incorrect and could not be used as a tool. So I wanted to counter that by simply saying there was a significant amount of latent intelligence, still is, probably more than this, enough for us to build upon. So how do we build upon that knowledge? So first of all, we need to create a comprehensive knowledge base. And then we need to affect the model's latent knowledge. And there's 3 ways to do that. And so, and for those unfamiliar, I'll be brief with this, but I think this is important for our understanding about this whole initiative. You can either do fine-tuning, training, or RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, just briefly, fine-tuning means you actually take a model, you essentially get your own copy of a model, for lack of a better way to describe it, and you set up a series of those very same prompts and completions like you saw in the latent intelligence test that I showed you on screen a second ago. And you feed those in through a fine-tuning process and affect your own version of the model. Now, that model can be parked. OpenAI lets you park it for free. Azure, unfortunately, you park it and you pay a per hour fee, which is extremely expensive. And this is one way to do it. You need a ton of data to actually move the needle. And the challenge, whereas it's an opportunity in the FileMaker space that we have 30 years worth of data in these models and the baseline models, it also is kind of a challenge when it comes to fine tuning, because whatever's wrong in there, we need to combat it with a ton of information. And so we likely need tens of thousands of prompts and completions set up to really to move the needle from a fine-tuning standpoint. The challenge with that approach is not so much the cost and the upfront collection of the knowledge and just that whole process and the ongoing cost as well too in the compute for fine-tuning, but it's also that we're now marrying the knowledge with a model. Okay, so imagine if we had done a fine-tuning exercise back with GPT 3.5, we would now have the power and latent intelligence of only GPT 3.5 with this knowledge base layered on top of it. The same is true for training. If you're an organization that has a ton of compute and you can just spin up and train models, awesome, great, but that is very expensive to do and requires a tremendous amount of compute. And again, you're training a model, you're training your own model. Retrieval augmented generation is a process that I'll show you just a quick diagram here in a second, but this I believe has advantages for this type of initiative because what we're really concentrating on doing is setting up a knowledge base. That knowledge base can then be searched upon, and then information that's retrieved from that, I'm suggesting doing this as a vector database, information that's retrieved by that can then be sent over to the model of any developer's choice. A new model comes out on a Monday. By Monday afternoon, you could be using the latest model with this knowledge layered on top of it. A huge advantage to future-proofing a knowledge set like this. The second part is citation. I'm going to get to why citation is super important. You just simply cannot cite who the contributor of the knowledge base information was in a fine-tuning or training method. It's extremely difficult and likely just not even possible because of the way that transformer training works. But with RAG, you absolutely can. You can actually say, Stephen provided this piece of information, and therefore, if that is used in a response at some point, that can be cited. And I'll talk why I think that's important. The other part too is in editing this information. If you put information that happens to be incorrect through a fine-tuning or training process, now that information lives inside these models and there's just no way to affect that. But with a RAG, what you're really doing is just creating a vector database of this information. So if there's incorrect information, you can point to it, make a change, or even update information if it changes, and you have full control over that just like you would with the database. Here's how RAG actually works. And so you'll notice that the real thing to focus on is that the user is asking a question. That question is then being sent over to a knowledge base. So that little red circle that you see there, the knowledge base that we're actually querying when when a learner in our case asks a question, is the thing that I'm suggesting that we as a community come together and contribute to. Because after the retrieval, it gets sent over to a language model. That's the key behind retrieval, is that we're actually getting truth and knowledge from a separate knowledge base, not from the model. So what the model's doing is just turning it into an answer or carrying on the pragmatics of a conversation or giving some insights and wisdom or formatting it and presenting it in a way that's specific to a learner, for example. It's not, it doesn't have the responsibility of actually providing the knowledge itself. So this focuses on the knowledge instead of the language model, or the language part of the language model rather than the knowledge in the language model. So the other part that is of really significant opportunity for our community is that those 50,000 developers out there can interact with this knowledge base and can update the knowledge base or provide feedback on the knowledge base. And depending on how that mechanism works, users can find factually incorrect data and then actually provide their own data to correct it or further enhance it or update it. That can then be cited by them or actually at the very least just pushed out to the knowledge base. This is a big deal.
So
that,
Cris,
go ahead.
can I ask you, so this reminds me of a separation model. So you're taking two things that are good and putting them together and not making either one try to do the other thing, right? So because to me, the whole secret sauce in this entire thing is some sort of self-learning that, you don't have to constantly go back and retrain, because there's just that, for instance, when we first started playing with this stuff, it didn't even know Joe Biden was president, because the last time it scraped the internet was a couple of years ago, right? So,
and it didn't know what Studio was either, Rick, right? Like wasn't even knowledgeable of the new products either.
Right, but I think that you're onto exactly the missing piece is leverage the AI models to do the things they're good at, but have a knowledge base that can be honed and added to that it can draw upon.
You nailed it on separation model. Hats off, man. That's perfect. I've been looking, I've tried to map these to FileMaker metaphors whenever possible, but that's the perfect one. It's the, now we can work on the interface, so to speak, without actually touching the backend data structure or worrying about the data, or we can migrate knowledge to a new model, for example, using your metaphor. It's really perfect. And the expert reinforcement, and that allows for expert reinforcement. And the expert reinforcement part, I think, is equally as profound of an opportunity for the Claris community as just simply having 30 years worth of knowledge in the database. Because if we have 50,000 individuals that can actually interact with this knowledge, even if it's in a chat bot where learners are learning, for example, you can have these little, the little thumbs down things that you guys are all familiar with. You just saw me show a clip of that here a second ago. And what that actually does is it can actually go find whatever rows within a vector database where this intelligence came from, and either allow the expert who's reinforcing it to update it themselves, or send an update in for voting or upvoting or request to actually fix that problem. This is not possible in ChatGPT right now. I know Matt Navarre and I talked about this on our last podcast episode, where I think there's a misconception where if you're in ChatGPT and it comes back with a bad answer and you go, oh no, that's not the right answer. And then it says, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You're right. Now that I looked at it, here's the right answer. We didn't change anything in the latent knowledge of that model. We just changed it in your conversation. And that's a really important thing. So this is how you can change it in the latent intelligence. The other part too that I'm really fascinated with, and I've purposely given it its old name to remove any political, type of layers of this. But there's this really cool method called the birdwatch method, which is which allows for community participation and collaborative filtering, which I think would be absolutely perfect for something like this. It really boils down to like upvoting and experts who are getting a higher rating level for feedback that could then influence whether or not they can immediately make a change to the knowledge base, or whether or not that has to go through some voting process. And it's totally open source code, which we could apply to this. And essentially, it would work in the same manner as the most active participants to answer a question on community, for example. The one that gets the highest one actually ends up being the answer. That same thing can be applied systematically here. And again, I don't want to introduce politics into this, but those of you who are probably reading between the lines know that this is in use very effectively in one of the largest social media platforms in the world. And I think it could be, and it's open source, so it could be applied here in a very clever way. So we could spend some time later digging into that, but this would allow the most active participants in feedback who have proven to have the best expertise to be the ones that can fast track updates. Not to say that not everyone gets a voice, but maybe the first time you provide some feedback, it has to get upvoted through some experts or something like that, right? And this also provides a feedback rating too, which, for example, Claris could post or use or share publicly as a way to get recognition for participation. The other thing that's really important, and this is really why RAG is really the only way to do this, is it would also allow us to provide for citation. So what would be really compelling is, to kind of reward or incentivize participants, is that when an answer comes back, now keep in mind, these are not databases. For more on that, go check out our last podcast that Matt Navarre and I just did. But the vector database is actually a database. And so when you say something like, tell me about the choose function, it may find 5 or 6 different references within all the different documents that have been submitted to the knowledge base and then been vectorized. It might find references to those. And when you vectorize a document, you can also supply it with metadata. So that little row not only has the vectors that will help it show up as part of a query to answer the question, but it'll also say what the original document was, and, for example, who the person was, who the expert was that submitted that document. So that means that, you don't want to pepper a bunch of advertising into this learning mechanism, but you could have citation, which means that people could be incentivized to provide their knowledge And so that future learners, when they encounter answers that involve that knowledge, they could click on one of these little bubbles and then be even navigated over to their training sources for deeper training, just as a way to provide incentives for participation. This could even do things like, oh, go right ahead.
Yeah. No. So what comes across my mind, and it's really hitting right at what, when you and I started talking a couple of years ago, what some of the concerns were in that there's 30 years worth of data, but there's probably more wrong answers than right. But now if you have this piece, say there's someone asks a question about a calculation and it comes back heavily weighted because Ray Colligan said this, right? Or Bev Voth said this about XML, and they carry more weighting because of their expertise that can get built into that, so that it helps correct it, right? For instance, you'll see a number of MVPs on our community that are really always answering questions like, Wim DeCord or Bev or Josh, because of their expertise, right? So if you can capture that, then you're setting on something.
Well, you just gave the idea that may be the baseline expert rating for the birdwatch mechanism is the community participation ratings that currently exist. I think that makes the most sense. The other part, Rick, by the way, is that when an expert has influenced one of the answers, they can show up as citation. But even more importantly, so we have this system where we have these chatbots that when we do document retrieval, we use citation back to just whatever the original document was, so they can navigate to it and look at it. But the really important part is when we don't find an answer in the document in the vector store, we put a message down below it that says, look, this is an answer that actually came from the latent intelligence of the model. So trust it, as you will. So we'll have a lot of those types of answers that could, basically could be wrong or could be correct. But as more and more experts influence the knowledge base, we'll have less and less of those. And then that way, when they actually pop up, people know that, hey, maybe this one isn't, maybe you should check this calculation function that came back or something like that.
Chris, can you imagine, sorry, I keep interjecting, but
No,
can you imagine that every time you have this base model that has this latent knowledge, but it doesn't have the other part, imagine giving it a certification exam to give it the baseline of here's what its latent knowledge is. If you're nothing but, there's no citation, you can trust it at this level, right? It got 70% on the certification, right?
It's so good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and so there's a note that I wanted to bring about continuous scoring of the latent intelligence. So we can absolutely, like you said, make the model take the certification exam and just publicly post, okay, it was a 0.64. Now with, a couple months later, it's now a 0.72 and so on and so on. And that way you can actually put in the citation, hey, this is coming from the original latent intelligence that was scored, and you could probably get a better answer at this other higher score, just like letting people know what's available there. So yeah, no, absolutely, that's huge. And the other thing is too, when it comes back and says this was not part of the knowledge base retrieval in this answer, the little thumbs down or thumbs up could encourage an expert who might have a better answer to say, hey, this is an area where we actually need some information, and they could either do that within the interface or take that knowledge back and go find some information and add it to the knowledge base. So currently, this is the data. Had in these informal conversations with our friends here at Claris, and I'm certainly aware of all that information that I'll let the Claris folks speak to that in a second, but I just wanted to kick everything off by donating my own knowledge to this. I just want to put my tokens where my mouth is on this. And so I've curated together one. It just so happens that I'm just kind of like obsessive about scripts, creating scripts for like actual reading scripts for every Lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning video I've ever done. There's a few thousand of those. Also hundreds of different YouTube links, offline videos I've created, every podcast I've ever done, and any one of my 50 DevCon Engage or another 20 plus or so Macworld ones, and then any user group session I've ever done. I have transcripts of those. And so I put those all together into one knowledge base just to kind of give you an idea of what participants can do. And I put them all together, and I found out that is 2.5 million tokens of me talking about FileMaker. And I am excited to be able to donate that as an initial baseline of the knowledge set. For the folks at Claris, if you want to speak to what other kind of knowledge you have available, I mean, the obvious ones are like help and stuff like that. Ronnie, you and I have talked about this. Rick, you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah, we can, we'll have to get some final approval and stuff like that, but some, you pointed out here, most of the knowledge that we've been looking at already. So the entire help, which is already available, but we just, get some, cross some T's and dot some I's there. But the knowledge base, there's that is absolutely exportable. DevCon sessions have been for many years already been recorded and available on YouTube, but also the slide decks for all those sessions, which are great corpus of data to be accompanied with the video, especially nowadays when we got large language models that are multimodal that can really be amazing there. And then and all the other webinars that we've done there as well. So there's a wealth of knowledge there. The other thing that, and you mentioned this as well, and have conversations and see how well we can do it, is the community conversations, right? The threads that are happening there. And a lot of those, like you mentioned before, we already have built in the system to choose the best answer, if you will. So I'm starting to have conversations internally and see how that can be, how we can manage that data, and if that can be part of this. I will push everything. I will do everything I can to get that, because I believe this is the right thing to do. But those pieces of data are available, and we'll try to make them.
Yeah, the upvotes and the scoring part is such a big deal, because that's like,
you already have that.
That's what and that actually frames up what the problem in the latent
for sure
it is in the first place, is that, like Rick, you said, if you go to like a Stack Overflow page or any forum page, half of it is, hey, this thing isn't working, what's wrong with this script, and that script is wrong, right? And then maybe a quarter of it is the right answer. And unfortunately, when you're just looking at text versus text, the wrong answers are overwhelming the right answers. And so that upvote helps that. Yeah, Steve.
How do we control the weight of the most current information is probably the most correct information versus something from 10 years ago?
It's such a great point. And also one of the reasons why going with the RAG approach actually provides advantage there. And really it boils down to now there's going to be tons of older information in the knowledge set. But if we focus on the latest and greatest information in the knowledge base, and keeping in mind that by simply doing a search against a vector store, taking that information, pairing it with a question and sending that to the language model, along with proper guardrails and instruction on the prompt side behind the scenes, that is actually weighting the answer that you provided to the language model over its own latent intelligence in the first place. So by that means, we could take out all the FileMaker 15 stuff from the knowledge base itself and focus on the latest and greatest to further help offset the older, outdated information that's in the corpus of data. And luckily, though, a lot of it has remained the same. That's actually kind of
and I was going to say, a lot of the stuff, like, for example, a knowledge base, all of it, they are tagged by version. So there are things in the knowledge base, for example, that are applicable all the way from FileMaker 7 all the way to 19, right? But they are tagged. And so as part of the, in RAG, that will come up and it could be part of the answer. Say, hey, the only thing, I can imagine a response saying, hey, I found information or basic information that applies to FileMaker 12 that might still be relevant today, might be the XYZ, right? So all those things, might be still be relevant, even if it be all.
Chris,
go ahead. Yeah.
The other thing that occurs to me, because certainly we have the help for all of our products, and then we have the knowledge base for our products, and to feed the base information, that's great. But selfishly, what I would also want to leverage AI is to make those better. For instance, we know what we did and we say, okay, here's what we did. But when it comes to practical examples, I think we could do a lot better. And that's where we could come the other direction and say, let's improve our help. Let's improve our knowledge base based on the feedback coming the other direction. I think that they would just ratchet each other up, right?
They absolutely would. And by the way, then, so this addresses removal of outdated materials and ongoing updates. But the whole point of having this knowledge base then means, and since this is an open source initiative, what that means is that the knowledge base itself would become publicly available to anyone that wants to use it. And just to be clear, we would want to allow anyone to connect to this through API. or to just simply do searches, do the retrieval aspect in their own chat interfaces, or if they want to use this as a help system within their own website or web property, that they could be connecting to this and leveraging whatever model of choice that they want as a result. So what I would imagine is that this would be, could be a source of knowledge, a unified source of knowledge, sort of the global brain of this Claris knowledge that could then be leveraged by all sorts of trainers and learners and websites and help systems all over the world. And the beauty of it being AI is localization, by the way, is an absolute slam dunk. Like this could be actually converted by simply just saying what the language is in the call into at minimum like 35 different languages worldwide. And localization is no joke. So that that is extremely important here. So the idea is so anyhow, the point is we would want to create this as a community and then make it available to users within the community as well too. Really just kind of taking any friction out of the learning process and really, instead of having a bunch of different silos of these knowledge, we would have one unified knowledge set, which of course comes with some of the challenges of how we make that available and who's doing that and so on and so on. And Stephen, yeah, and by the way, I wanted to address your question too, but go ahead as well.
So on the slide right now, I see all sorts of ancillary parts of information. What about actual FileMaker files themselves? What is the mechanism and means to get information in there? We have the universal XML, we have the screenshots or PDFs of scripts, we have, many different sources of ways to feed that. How would you go about that?
The initial challenges with FMXML were just token limits because I think the very first time I tried a FMXML myself, we only had like 16K of a token window to even work with, and I don't know if anyone has formally tried to tokenize, or Ronnie, I have a sneaky suspicion you maybe know this. What would be like the token size of like a baseline even DDR or XML DDR?
Oh, it's massive. Right now, I think the only, I think you could only use, there are probably only like 5 models in the world that can take, they can take a,
For now.
for now, that could take it into context, a moderately sized FileMaker.
But
The
that
problem is
application,
it's
because it's
really
massive.
verbose when you
Very,
deal
very
with
verbose.
XML.
Yeah.
Too
I-
verbose.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge there is figure out what do we want from those, right? What do we want? What's the knowledge that we want to retrieve from that? Is it best practices on database schema? Is it layout efficiency? Like, what is it that we're trying to get from there? And I think focusing on those things and carving that out and putting it in a better way might be a better route for now.
I think, 100% agree. And that this conversation is massive. And I don't even think it's restricted by token limits currently, because I think, like to Ronnie's point, if future conversations were focused on what information we can actually extract from these, like what information's in there, what could this be used as examples for learners? We might not need the entire FMXML, for example. We might just need to focus on certain elements of it and pair those elements with the actual formula or something like that. So like to give you an example, it might be like identifying just calculation fields that have comments in the comments field as to what they're doing, and then the actual formula, and then forgetting the rest of it, and actually just being able to extract those. And because they're in XML, we can actually identify what those elements are a little bit easier as if they were just in block text to parse. So that is a fascinating idea. And also,
I think just, and I don't want to rabbit hole down it, but one of the aspects of that, one of the reasons why I say, because I've been looking at this, one of the things that we can carve out of those applications are scripts, representation of scripts, for example, and then they can be used for a lot of things, for summarizing, for figuring out what script does, but also for later on generating, using them as examples to generate other scripts. But using the entire file, it's difficult. I think if we do it by kind of by module, if you will, by purpose, right? Those make a little bit more sense. Yeah, scripts is one of those that I've been looking at.
Yeah, and I think a well-commented script could actually be a training element itself. Like literally, feeding that in and saying this line does
Absolutely.
this line does that, and then you can actually the models can learn contextually, you know, what the script in its entirety is doing. And Stephen, to the point of like guardrails in place to prevent users, like all the different things that we worry about here, absolutely. You know, the underlining instruction and prompting that is used in the, well, so first of all, it would be the user asking a question, the learner asking a question, searching the knowledge base, the universal knowledge base for that answer, the answer coming back. It's at the point where we send that question, the answer to the language model, that we want to make sure that we're not getting any intercepting or, you know, prompt injection. We are technically RAG is prompt injection, by the way, for good, but it could be used for bad as well too. And but what I can tell you from, like, you know, out on the street and deploying these things is we have tons of tools and techniques available to us on the prompting guidelines that can prohibit you know, interception of this, or, you know, nefarious actors. And honestly, my teams, we've jailbroken all of the ChatGPT and Claude's and Gemini's like base header instruction. So we use all of that to kind of prohibit the same type of language and concerns that you might have. But that also comes on whatever whoever's deploying a chatbot, you know, however they're using this knowledge, they have control over that too. And access privileges might be a thing too. At the very least, key access to this is really, I think, important, so you can see who's doing what. And the nice thing about retrieval is that you can log every single retrieval and know exactly from what key it came from, and you can match that to nefarious activity if need be. So the way that everyone can help is, well, the type of intelligence that we're looking for, you see that on the left-hand side. I mean, the big one there that strikes me is just the custom function repository. I mean, it would be amazing to be able to get our hands on that. You know, articles, blogs, posts. There's tons of opportunity there. Podcast transcripts, webinars. I mean, just like endless amounts of this. And the nice thing again about RAG is that we don't have to turn, like we would from a training or fine tuning standpoint. We don't have to turn these into prompts and completions. We can take them in their native form and send them over for chunking in the vectorization process. Also, like YouTube links, we don't even need to transcribe them. There's elements like, you know, like LangChain has tools that you can actually just point to URLs and just roll through, and it pulls those down and vectorizes them and transcribes them at the same time. So there's actually processes for all these in place. The other part of the ask is like Ian, yeah. So, okay. So Matt, you were talking about site things like server addresses, credentials. Yeah. Great point. Personal identifiable data. Awesome point. And then Ian, yeah, you did a great job answering that question here in the chat. That which AWS product are you thinking of there, Ian? I think I know which one you might.
Oh, I cannot remember the name because there's so many of them. But essentially, it's they've got one that applies AI to looking for things like things that look like passwords, that look like keys, that look like URLs, personal identifiable information. So it kind of flags that up as here's some data that possibly shouldn't be where it is.
Yeah, we use Microsoft Presidio as well too for PII scrubbing. And so what that allows you to do is actually just transform. You can do various different things like eliminate it and redact it, or turn it in. Like if it's still useful to have an address, for example, it will take the real address and turn it into like 123 Mockingbird Lane or something like that. So there's some ways to do that, and various tools. None of these problems would be unique to this initiative, which is the good news. A lot of people have been achieving these. So I think the first thing is a forum for communication so that we can all collaborate on this. I don't know how we would do that. And then really the big question is the vector database, where it lives, how it's hosted, who hosts it, you know, how costs are managed that way. And if we decide to do something like Birdwatch, there might be some engineering required on the Birdwatch implementation. But before I close this part out, there's something I've been dying to share with everybody. And I think I have a name for, here's some of the, actually a couple things on the benefits: localization, citation that we discussed, free access worldwide, and potentially even an exchange that showcases all the different apps and integrations that people out in the community are using with this to help kind of drive, you know, more engagement. So here, I have a name. I want a working title for this. initiative instead of Claris AI learning initiative, whatever. That's a mouthful. I want to give it one word. And so let me just frame it up by just showing Steve Jobs making a comment here in 1985, and then I will reveal the silly, but I think we'll have some fun with name of this initiative moving forward, and then we can close out with what some next steps might be. So let's listen to Steve say some very wise words. Again, this is 1985. Just this is a true visionary speaking here. So let's check this out.
I can't ask Aristotle a question. I mean, I can, but I won't get an answer. And so my hope is that in our lifetimes, we can make a tool of a new kind, of an interactive kind, when the next Aristotle is alive. We can capture the underlying worldview of that Aristotle in a computer. And someday, some student will be able to not only read the words Aristotle wrote, but ask Aristotle a question and get an answer. And that's what I hope that we can do. There is such momentum behind this that it will happen. It will permeate and change forever our educational processes. And my hope, again, is that not too many generations of students will pass through before this happens.
Okay, so here's the name. Little drama. Claristotle. We're gonna have some fun with it. But I don't know. I think it writes itself, frankly. So, and just in case, I did reserve these domain names so that we can use them for the initiative. But I just think it's fun. It's easy. It gives us all a smile, and it allows us all to kind of talk about this and share amongst ourselves. So now the question is, where do we go from here? This is just a mildly formed idea at the moment, and certainly we've got interest, and it's a matter of getting the word out. I think the point is like we can shake the bushes by putting this on agendas for user group meetings, or making reference to these. Like Matt and I have been talking about this in our podcast episodes, and just trying to create some awareness and conversation and engagement. I know the Claris folks have tons of ability to get conversation going and engage as well too. But really, like, where do we move this? Where can this conversation happen? Where can ideas happen? Where can we define the next steps? And wanted to open that up for discussion as we close out our session here this morning.
What cadence would you say stuff should be fed to this model? Quarterly, as every post is made? Our community is very cross-pollinated. We cite each other all the time. So how does that affect the weight of stuff when it's, I repeat your blog article or something like that on another site?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think citation can be handled in the same manner that it's probably handled now. Like, that's a really interesting thing to look at. But yeah, like if somebody says, hey, look at this article that so-and-so wrote, like what's actually what is being cited as the author for that. And then the cadence, as far as the cadence is concerned, I think if we're doing this right, we've provided a mechanism to be able to push knowledge to the space that can happen in real time, and that people can integrate in whenever they're updating a blog post. They can push that blog post, and when something's been upvoted or determined as solved in a forum, that that action could push these things out, or they could be done. And there's going to be a lot of upfront vectorization of knowledge, of course, like the Claris folks and even the stuff that I've got prepared. We'll have to cram that stuff through. But I would imagine that for this to be the most effective, it would just be we take any friction points off and just allow for this to happen continuously, and really get some good momentum there. And that's thinking of it as an ideal, but that should probably be our goal at the very least.
We would have to update our EULAs in terms of services, letting people know that this content is being pushed out to AI.
Well, and also give them the opportunity to opt out as well, too, right? Like even at the user participation level or at the response level, whatever it may be, we definitely we absolutely do not want or need, frankly, to be scraping knowledge that unwilling participants are offering. I just don't even think that would even be necessary. So I think putting mechanisms in place to prevent that, I think, is super important as well.
Yeah. Chris, yeah, just an interesting time. I'm just thinking about, next steps, and I think establishing some way of communication between the group,
Yeah.
because this is fascinating. This is amazing, and I think I'm all in. But there's a lot of details that need to be hashed out, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot that's gonna happen here. So I think having effective communication is going to be critical, especially now at the beginning. You have any ideas? I mean, I would suggest something fast and easy, something like Slack or something like that, to keep everybody engaged very quickly to get started. But
Yeah. That's what I'm imagining. I don't yeah, my initial instinct was setting up a community Slack of some sort. I don't know if anybody has a streamlined approach to that, or already has something similar that's easy to replicate. That's where my instinct is as well too, and that allows us to create channels and different
Maybe a channel in FM Slug, already existing one, a ton of people already there.
Yeah, whatever it may be. I am a little deficient in that space.
Yeah, FM Slug though, it's time limited in what's saved. It's a free account basically that.
Oh yeah. Well, it would cost a fortune to have everybody be a member in this one. That'd be
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually honestly
hundreds of dollars a month for active users.
That's where I stopped evaluating the Slack thing for myself. But something akin to that, I think, is going to be critically important. So, I'm almost reluctant to for our session to expire here in a few minutes without knowing where we go next in this conversation. So I would almost even just say, like, I sent out an additional email thread. We'll certainly have everybody's participation here. But the immediate next step is what's the forum for this communication moving forward? And yes, while Slack is the obvious one, that could become pretty costly to manage for whomever's hosting that, if we get the type of engagement that we're hoping for, frankly. So I don't know. Maybe I'll try to work a little bit back channel with some folks and figure that out. I hope it won't die there, though. I hope we can find something, because this is oh, Ethan, what's Campfire? Oh, sorry, Ethan mentioned Campfire in the
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. It's you buy the code, but you only buy it once and then can self-host, but you're not paying like ongoing subscriptions. I mean, no matter what you do, it's going to cost something to have a community like this. But this is like a few $100, I think.
Okay,
just an idea.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe you and I could take a look at that and maybe propose that to folks. So stand by. Maybe we'll park this on. Yeah, I guess also potentially community. I don't know how Claris feels about that as well. You certainly have a lot of other conversations.
Yeah, we could. I mean, it wasn't my first thought, just because Discord was my second option. It's because the immediacy. I mean, especially at first, my experience normally with things like this is that there's going to be a small group of people who are going to be driving a lot of the things at the beginning, while there'll be a lot of people who are contributing and be asking questions. And something like a online forum is good for those things, but for these first few steps, when you're organizing, you're doing fast communication, something that's fast and easy usually is best. So something like Discord was my second option.
Yeah, I'm with. What's the cost? How does Discord work? I mean, I don't host any. I'm only members of different communities.
I know there are some free options with Discord. I think maybe those are the first steps, right? Let's figure out what's
exactly.
And how to host it.
These are excellent suggestions. I like Ethan's suggestion as the plan B behind Discord. But yeah, let's investigate Discord first. And then
check with Proof Geist and with
that's what I'm thinking.
Richard Carlton. Do they have their own server that they're running, or we need to kind of figure out what they've done?
exactly what they're doing with their communities is the first thing that I thought of when Ian mentioned Discord. So let's endeavor towards that as our first step. I will and then we'll just publicly get the word out and allow people to onboard against that, and then we can continue the discussion from there, maybe even set up future conversations. Really, our friends from Claris, thanks so much for showing up and continuing to have interest in this space. I know we've been having these conversations for going on years now in these cases, but it's all just sort of a culmination of that. The time seems like it's now. I'll just end by saying, as an educator in this space, I am profoundly moved by the opportunities that we have in front of us to create this guide on the side, or this like high quality mentor training experience that can not only benefit new learners to the platform, existing learners to the platform, but new evaluators to the platform too, and taking any barriers away from learning about the Claris platform and helping it grow. So I think there's just some like really tremendous opportunity here for all parties involved. So I don't know, I'm really excited about this, and thank you all for showing up this morning and your support, and I want us all to own this as a community. We have no spearhead at the top of this or anything like that. It's just all our community voice, and I think that's the thing that's going to be most powerful here. So hopefully we'll see you all on Discord. Thank you so much for showing up this morning, and you guys all know how to reach me. We sent out this email with everyone, and please feel free to send any back channel information. But thank you all very much today, and let's look forward to continuing our discussion on the Claristotle, and hopefully that brings a smile to your face when you think about that, because we're intended to have some fun with it. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Friday night, wherever you're chiming in from, and look forward to seeing you guys on our conversational platform here very shortly.
Great.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chris.
That's great.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone.